Hello everybody, my name's Zahir and I want to welcome you all to my channel Plants and Paints, where today we're going to be doing the part 2 of my Anthurium Veitchii video. So part 1, for those of you who aren't aware, is the general care and maintenance video for this particular plant, and today's video, which is part 2, is going to be like a general introduction into the plant. So we're going to talk about the plant itself, where it originates from, a little bit of information about it, and anything else generally that I came across on the internet and through reading through a couple of the books that I have. So I hope you enjoy the video and let's get started. So the Anthurium Veitchii, which is also known as the King Anthurium, is an epiphytic species of plant and is from the genus Anthurium and can be found growing natively in the rainforests of Colombia. It is grown in more temperate regions now, and generally you'll find it growing in greenhouses and is very popular as a house plant as well. The main reason for that is for the long pendulous leaves that can grow to several feet in length. The Anthurium genus are aroid plants originating in the neotropics, and they actually number around 825 species of plants, so there is quite a variety of Anthuriums out there. And the Anthurium is part of the Veitchii family, many of which are famous for their foliage, such as the ever popular plant which we are going to be discussing today, which is the Anthurium Veitchii. So for those of you who are not aware and are tuning in just to get an update on my video, this is the Anthurium Veitchii itself. So a very beautiful plant with really nice leaf characteristics about it. Quite ribbed patterning on there, which is quite unique to this plant. You won't find many plants with that. The elegant and somewhat bizarre appearance of the Veitchii will grab your attention due to the totally wild look that it has, which almost gives off the impression that the plant is telling you that, look, I actually am a plant that belongs in a jungle, which I think is quite a unique part of its appearance. And it actually, as far as I'm concerned, it does give off that sort of impression that, you know, this particular plant actually belongs in a jungle and comes from a rainforest type environment, which is, I think personally, is really cool. So yeah. Now the leaves of the Veitchii themselves can actually get up to 6 foot long and have a quilted or deeply ribbed appearance to them. So what I mean by that is actually the foliage itself, you can see, because this is quite a young leaf, but you can already see the ribbed appearance on there. But as it matures, the ribs get deeper and deeper, and the veining becomes more recessed into the leaf itself, so it just becomes more and more striking as it gets older. And as I mentioned, the leaves themselves in their natural environment can get anything up to about 6 foot in length, which is absolutely mammoth proportions. So if you can imagine these ribs but being very deep in there, and on a leaf that is actually 6 foot in length, that's going to be quite an amazing plant to behold. Now the Veitchii itself actually used to be considered an extremely rare plant, and due to that, in the hobby it fetched quite a high price, well, an extremely high price in fact, and generally was reserved for that reason to the more avid aroid collector. So the kind of person who's not going to mind spending an extensive amount of money on this plant. But over the years it's become a lot more widely available due to tissue culture. And what that's actually done is it's driven the price right down, so that the average collector such as myself and all of you, I'm sure, it's made it more readily available to us, which has been absolutely great, because I can't imagine anyone who doesn't want to add one of these to their collection, because they are absolutely stunning plants. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this particular plant is an epiphytic plant. Now, what that means, being an epiphyte, is that it grows off of the ground, so it will grow up in the branches of trees and anywhere up the bark of the tree and things like that, and it will actually wrap its roots around them, where it will gain its nutrients from the rain that actually comes down through the trees and stuff like that. So being that it's an epiphyte, you're never going to find this on ground level. This is not the kind of plant that's actually going to root itself into the soil, and epiphyte actually means the type of plant that grows above ground level. So you're generally going to find this, you know, growing up a tree or quite high up in the canopy, rather than something that is ground dwelling. Now, the Anthurium veitchii was actually identified in 1876, and in ideal growing conditions, you're going to find that the leathery spear-shaped leaves are going to get up to, as I mentioned earlier, about 6 foot in length. So trying to replicate the rainforest environment when you're actually growing this is actually quite important, because I think I did mention it in my general care and maintenance video, but this particular plant, if the leaves get damaged, they don't actually have a way of repairing themselves, and the foliage on these plants generally will last years. So the last thing you want to have is a plant that has damaged foliage on it. So try to replicate its own growing environment as closely as possible. It's quite easy to do so. I mean, if you go to my general care and maintenance video, all the information for temperatures and humidity and stuff like that are all in there. But I think it is quite important to stress that fact again, that trying to replicate that as closely as possible is key to actually keeping the Anthurium veitchii, or the King Anthurium, as happy as possible. Now, as the plant actually grows, the many lateral veins become more pronounced while taking on a more white to silvery appearance to them, which actually adds to giving the leaves their really stunning characteristic about them, which against their ribbed background is going to actually look really stunning. I think the opportunity to actually see a mature leaf is quite rare. I mean, myself, I rarely come across any, for instance, on Instagram or any on YouTube videos where they've actually got very mature leaves on them. But the pictures that I do manage to find on the internet, or if I go to, for instance, Kew Gardens, and I managed to see them there, you can actually see that the veining in the veitchii becomes quite light in comparison to the actual ribbing and main body of the leaf itself, which helps the ribbing of the leaf to actually stand out, which really adds to the allure of the leaf itself, which I think is another reason why they become so popular. So generally, when you're looking, if you were to type in Anthurium veitchii on the internet, you're generally not going to get pictures of a juvenile plant. You're going to find the more adult pictures where you're actually going to be able to see that ribbing is quite detailed. And as I mentioned, the reason behind that is because the veining actually becomes lighter in color and actually takes on a white to silvery appearance, which helps to give that ribbing that very 3D look to it. So with that in mind, what you will often find is experts who have left information on the internet, they will generally advise you against keeping this plant in quite bright light. Now, I've read quite a lot of contradicting information about that, and I would suggest that actually you can keep this in quite bright but in direct lighting. Now, the reason that I say this, however, is due to its natural growing environment. So within the tropical rainforest that you can actually find this plant in, it actually gets really high up towards the canopy. So you'll find this plant actually growing really high, where it's getting a lot closer to that bright indirect light. Although it is still shaded by the canopy itself, it's higher to that source of light that actually is getting through to the rainforest. And as I'm sure you can imagine, walking through the rainforest, it's not dark and you're walking at ground level when you're passing through there. So the higher up, the brighter it's going to get. And these actually get very, very high up in that rainforest. So providing you're not putting it in direct sunlight, I would suggest that having it in quite a bright indirect sunlight is not going to damage the plant in any way. And from what I've seen from some of the pictures and descriptions from some of the books I read as to where these people are keeping their particular plants, it seems to be a mixture of 50-50. Now, the people who are keeping it in quite a bright indirect sunlight, their Veitchii leaves in general seem to be quite a lot bigger than the ones who are trying to avoid that bright indirect light, where they're giving them quite a moderate indirect light. So based on that, and it's just due to my own sort of research, so obviously if you feel that my explanation doesn't go into enough information, then please feel free to go off and do some extra research yourself. But from what I can tell, the brighter the light, providing it's indirect, the bigger the leaves that the plant is going to produce. So I myself would actually advise you to keep it in quite a bright indirect sunlight, just to make sure that you're getting the leaves to produce themselves to be as big as possible, because obviously in nature they get to up to 6 foot in length, but trying to replicate that at home is going to be quite difficult. You're very seldom going to get a plant that's actually going to grow to them sort of epic proportions, whereas the less you're trying to reproduce its natural environment, the less likely you are to actually get that as close as is possible for you to do so within a home or greenhouse environment. So I would just say, for argument's sake, I would say definitely put it in a bright but indirect sunlight. I mean, myself, you can see my grow tent directly behind me there. I keep this particular Veitchii on the second shelf down, and you can see right up above, just there, I've got a grow light, and it is quite an intense grow light, although it doesn't have a ton of white light in there. It is generally a light which is focused on photosynthesis, so it's just providing the energy that it needs to photosynthesize so that the leaves can grow. And in the time that I've had this, which hasn't been long, maybe this particular one itself, I think maybe has been about a month and a half to 2 months, the leaves that are actually on it have doubled in size since I've had it, and it has 2 new leaves growing from there with another leaf on the way. So that bright indirect light does seem to be working for me. So if you want to take that on board, that's great, and I hope that it works for you as well as it is working for me. Now, finally, before I end the video, what I want to do is I want to touch on a little something where there seems to be a little confusion on the internet. It actually had me confused at one stage as well, where I had to go off and do some research, because obviously I want to add a Veitchii to my own collection, but I do want to get one of substantial size, and I have been speaking to my supplier and he is currently working on that for me. I want to try and get one with at least 3 foot leaves on there, and there seems to be a lot of information on the internet suggesting that there are different forms of this plant. So just as an example, you've got the narrow leaf form and the wide leaf form, and I've seen, you know, them referred to as that, almost suggesting that they are 2 different types of a Veitchii. So what I actually did, I went and did some research into this, and what I actually found is that absolutely you can notice natural variation between the individuals. However, this by no means at all is suggestive to there being different species of this plant. So the fact that the plant itself produces narrow leaves and wide leaves is a characteristic of the Anthurium veitchii. So there is no such thing, well, in description you can find it, as in like you'll see that people have said, okay, I've got the narrow leaf form, or I've got the wide leaf form, or I've got the one where the ribs are very close together, and I've got one where the ribs are very chunky and quite far apart from each other. Now, these are just general differences from the plant itself. Now, from the descriptions that I've read, and these come from some of the leading experts in this industry, is that the plant doesn't have to produce the leaves to look the same each time it produces a new leaf. So what you're actually going to find is, on a mature plant, you're going to get some leaves that are going to be wide, you're going to get some leaves that are going to be narrow, you're going to get some leaves where the ribs are very, you know, narrow in form, and you're going to get some leaves where the ribs are very chunky in form. And that all depends on where they're growing and the direction that they're facing to the light, and so on and so forth. So you could end up buying yourself a Veitchii thinking that, okay, I'm purchasing the narrow form, and it ends up producing leaves that are quite broad in respect to the leaves that it already had when the plant arrived to you. And this is more to do with the conditions you're providing it, rather than it actually being either a narrow or a wide form of Veitchii. So just to put that out there, the Veitchii is one species of plant, unless it has been hybridized. So unless somebody has actually taken that plant and crossbred it with another plant, which will then give it characteristics of that other plant, the Veitchii itself is one species of plant, and the leaves can be produced to actually come in lots of different forms. So that has been my general introduction into the plant itself. I hope that the information has been relevant for you, and I hope you've enjoyed the information that I've provided. If you do have any more questions about the Anthurium Veitchii, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. I know I haven't answered any of my comments from my previous video, but I had such a hectic week at work last week. We've got audits going on and everything, that I haven't had a chance to go through them. I have read them, but obviously I like to take my time answering, so I will get around to answering those. But as I was saying, if you do have any questions considering anything I haven't covered in either one of the two videos that I've put up, then please don't hesitate to leave that in the comment section. I do enjoy reading all your comments. I really look forward to them. For me personally, after filming the video, they're the thing I look forward to the most, to, you know, get people's feedback, see how they feel about the video that I've produced, and know whether it was or wasn't very helpful to them. And, you know, generally I get such great feedback from people that I absolutely love making these videos for you all. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Today is part 2 of the Anthurium general care and maintenance, as well as a general introduction to the plant. So as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't watched the general care and maintenance, then pop over to part 1 of my Anthurium Veitchii video, and also don't forget to like and comment on my videos. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications of future content that I'm due to release. And I hope you've enjoyed today's video. My name's Zahir, this is Plants and Paints, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I hope you have a lovely week ahead. Take care. Bye bye.